Welcome to the Monday, August 18th edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored today by DraftKings Bestball. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me on Twitter at JB Fantasy Sports. Alongside me every Monday, Jake Letarski. You can follow me at RotoJake. We're recapping the weekend news. We got some mock draft Monday, some best ball mixing in, and we also, most importantly, at least for I think today and this week, we'll be getting your auction strategy and tips and tricks all planned for the infamous RotoWire Stake League. Will be happening later this week. We had our beat Joe Bartel and Jake Letarski RotoWire NFFC auction draft last week. We talked about that. It was a lot of fun as well. You can find that on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel, us going live on that. So lots of different events to cover and go over that too, and lots of different news as well. But before we do all that, let's get a word from our sponsors, Circa Sports. Circa Million and Circa Survivor are back with a massive $21 million in guaranteed prizes. Between the two, you have the Circa Million, where you could pick 5 games against the spread each week, 18 weeks of action, of course, with 126 ways to win. You have that $1 million guaranteed for the winner and $6 million guaranteed overall in prizes. And then with Circa Survivor, 1 pick a week, no point spread, lasts the longest to win, at least 15 million total in guaranteed prizes across that. So enter Nevada, play from anywhere, 21 million guaranteed across both those competitions. Visit circasports.com for more details. All right, Jake, we're going to dive right into this because I think the preseason news and really the news over the past 24 hours has been hot and heavy. So I don't know about consequential. I don't know about consequential in terms of news, but Joe Flacco being named the Week 1 starter to me was a no-brainer. I thought that was going to be very obvious and evident to anyone who was drafting Shedeur Sanders, not in your Scott Fishbowl, Jake, so I know you're going to say that. Anyone who was drafting Shedeur Sanders in your shallow leagues, that was never going to be a probability that was occurring. But Flacco starts. I would imagine he starts for a certain duration of time, and then we'll see Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders or Kenny Pickett at some point. But Flacco officially named your Browns starting quarterback for Week 1.
Yeah, that's really kind of a non-news item for me because, like you suggested, that's something that we had anticipated happening for a matter of weeks now. Obviously, the Browns have this 4 quarterbacks in their room situation here, and the rookies that all eyes are on. The rookies got a lot of eyes on them for maybe not play-related reasons this week, but it's all not going to matter when it's all said and done there. There's a lot of Browns news actually happening, and as far as Flacco goes, I mean, a stab in 2 quarterback leagues at best. He's still not a quarterback that's on my board in 12-team standard leagues. So the news doesn't change a ton. Maybe you get a little bit more comfortable with, like, I don't know, your David Njoku ranking, or now that that's solidified. But again, I don't think that changes because Flacco is so good for Njoku. But there's not a whole lot of fantasy movement you can make outside of if your quarterback in a 2 quarterback league goes down surprisingly and you have to pick someone up for Week 1, then maybe it's Flacco. But that's kind of how we're going there. And we do have more Browns news as well because just like Jamie says, just in time for the Clowns news, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, maybe it solidifies a Jerry Jeudy or even a Cedric Tillman, who I think is probably a little bit undervalued given what he did at various points last year. But I agree. Flacco itself is a non-starter for me. But the other part of this, and I think it's far more consequential, is Quinshon Judkins, of course, the rookie second-round pick for the Browns. He will not face charges, at least that was deemed from the authorities from a legality perspective. But the actual signing of the rookie contract is still on hold as the Browns and Judkins team await the possible penalty that would come from this from the NFL's perspective. There's guaranteed money that's involved, given all the second round picks got that. And I think that's partially where this is going. But I would sooner assume both sides want this to be done, and that we now start talking about Judkins on the football field, that we're continuing to have her to belabor this point that we are is interesting to me, especially after the legality part of things were passed over last week. But yeah. I don't know. Have you seen any more on the Judkins stuff? Do you think there's any sort of firm timetables to when he could sign a contract and then get on the practice field?
I mean, I don't have any scoop on the situation necessarily, but I do agree with your sentiment that both sides want to get this done. I can tell you how a scenario played out in one of our RotoWire Invitational slow drafts. Right before the news came out, I ended up taking Jerome Ford in like the 9th round. For some reason, there's a big RB premium, and they're drying up significantly, at least in my version of one of the 5 drafts. We kind of
me too.
A mini fishbowl with our with the whole RotoWire and greater GDC staff. So that's what that is. But so I took him in the 9th round, heard the news. I was like, yeah. And then Judkins went in the 10th round, which prior to this, he wasn't necessarily on the radar except for your late round stabs. So there's an immediate reaction, at least in one of my slow drafts, to Judkins being there. I know it makes me feel a whole lot better about the high amount of stake I have in Dynasty with this guy. So that makes me feel better. But somebody that hasn't even been to camp through 2 weeks of the preseason, I wouldn't expect him to jump out to any kind of big roll out of the gates. I still think if you're taking Jerome Ford, you have about 4 weeks of him being the starter and taking the primary amount of workload, which we kind of called way back when the situation started. And now as we get closer and closer to the season and we see how that running back depth chart shapes out, it's coming to fruition here for us.
So let's tackle it two different ways. When the Judkins situation from a legality perspective emerged, there were some people, and I think smart people as well, who were saying, oh my God, this could be a Darius Geis thing. He literally will never play at all in the NFL. I had thought that was a bit rash going that direction, but the more and more that we had this, the contract not being signed, you had Jimmy Haslam contract conversation saying something effective. Yeah, I hope he signs it. It was like, okay, I mean, there's literally no positive news at all with this. And then for it to almost flip the switch last week when they had waived the right to a speedy trial and then overall it gets removed from a legality part of this too. Okay, it's almost like everyone then flipped the other way too strong as well. Like we have seen the NFL suspend players on less merit than what's going to happen with Judkins. And we are actually watching this unfold with Rashee Rice to the point where we don't know when Rashee Rice will be suspended, but that he will be at some point. Like there's too much of this. So, I mean, we got Judkins for $1 in our Jake Letarski, Joe Bartel auction draft in the NFSC. That looked like a steal. And 2 days later, in my dynasty draft, I did a friends and family one. He fell to pick number 12 in a 10-team league. That feels a little bit too far as well. But saying, hey, he's going to be an automatic starter, you're going to get him right away in around 6 or 7 or 8. I haven't seen that yet, but if it does, I would agree with you. Let's push back on that there's going to be at least some duration of time Jerome Ford is going to be playing significant minutes for the Browns.
Yeah, the last note I'll say on this is that I think it's honestly the guaranteed money and the contract details that are holding things up almost. I know they said they're waiting for the investigation, but I think it's the contract stuff that's holding stuff up because also this is the Browns team that just signed Isaiah Bond this weekend too to a 3-year deal, a wide receiver that went undrafted due to some sexual assault allegations kind of looming over him. But he seems to have been, cleared of that, or at least enough to the point where Cleveland is confident in it. I don't think this is an organization we've seen over the last couple of years that cares so much about what's going on off the field. They just want to get the dollar signs figured out here, and I think that's really the only obstacle to Judkins getting signed here.
More injury news to discuss from the preseason over the course of the weekend. Malik Nabers has now a third different injury, toe injury during training camp. That's reportedly going to be lasting almost all of the season. Then he suffers a shoulder injury, and now we have a back injury. Don't worry, though. The Giants are optimistic that he will still somehow play in week 1. I'm going to present this to you as a question, Jake, but I already know my answer to it, and I'm curious yours. Malik Nabers currently around that 8, 9, 10 pick range. You have Puka Nacua, you have Drake London, you have Brian Thomas. You could even have an A.J. Brown or Lab McConkey. How far is Malik Nabers falling in your mind? Is it past that receiver group or just past like the Ashton Genty, Christian McCaffrey late first round range? Because I at this point am pretty darn nervous as to what this is supposed to be like Malik Nabers for the full season.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, Malik Nabers is one of those players that's when it's all said and done, out of the 10, 12 leagues that I draft, I might not have any of because I haven't necessarily been in on him at his price just due to the general incompetence of the offense and quarterback situation, which was no different than last year. And he showed he could still be productive last year. But, even the NFFC over the last 10 days has him at 7 overall, right ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like I'm taking Amon-Ra over Nabers, I think, every time, especially in full PPR. I'm starting to take Christian McCaffrey over Nabers because, at least McCaffrey enters with a clean bill of health. We don't know what
theoretically
eventually, but for now, knock on wood, McCaffrey is doing that. Even Genty, he helped. He quenched some of my concerns by having a decent preseason game and scoring a touchdown and showing, some moderate skill in pace against
I was wondering if that was going to change things for you.
Defense. I actually saw him do something. You have to pass the eye test at some point, and going 3 for -1 is not much. Yeah, you get bottled up. That can happen, I guess, in a small sample size. But Nabers at 7 is too high for me. You would have to follow the turn, I think, for me to consider it. At this point, I mean, because even Puka Nacua, we can transition into our next bit of news. Puka Nacua is starting to look better now that Matt Stafford is back in 11 on 11 drills today, Monday, August 18th. So there's a lot, and we've written probably more Stafford notes than anyone else this offseason about all his various injuries. But now it looks like he's back in 11 on 11, which is in my mind, a pretty big step. Obviously, nobody's going to touch him. He's not going to take a hit. But we'll see how he can move around and see what comes of that. So in my mind, that might boost Puka up a little bit too, to that range where if it's a Puka versus Nabers scenario, I mean, it was pretty clear cut for Puka before the Stafford injury news came around. And if we're going to assume that Stafford's back, I mean, an epidural for a disc in your back is never a great sign. But if we assume that Stafford's back, then I think you have to return to that status quo.
I just don't know how you can assume Stafford will be back again. The epidural, like you mentioned, is a pretty serious thing that you have to do for a serious sort of back injury. Stafford is one of the toughest players in the NFL. I'm not discounting that. It just seems pretty unorthodox, maybe the best way of putting this, that you could assume that Stafford stays healthy all year. And even in that event, he's sharing in opportunities with Devonta Adams as well. Like if you're saying Malik Nabers or Puka Nacua, at that point, I would much rather have Drake London over both those guys. I'll take Genty, I'll take Derrick Henry. So that to me is even early second round. And it gets to that Brock Bowers, A.J. Brown portion of things where I'll consider either one of those receivers. But the Stafford returning to practice, that is good news, of course. That it took 3 or 4 days extra for the Rams to even kind of report on that or assume that Stafford was coming back is one thing too. So I'm with you to a certain extent on fading both Nabers and Nacua, who were in the news this past weekend with different injury stuff. Probably one of the worst scenarios for injury stuff is Joe Mixon, who is now went from don't worry about it, it's just some lower body injury in May or June to, well, he's on the NFL list, but he'll be totally fine, to now not certain for week 1 being able to play with that foot or ankle injury. Again, the Texans still have not defined what that is, and frankly, they don't need to until the start of the season. I don't know if it's because I'm scared off of the Christian McCaffrey thing, but I'm completely out on Mixon. I had went to the fantasy football last week. We had talked about that a little bit in Cleveland, Ohio. It was a lot of fun. There was one of the panels that was literally dedicated to injury stuff. One of the takeaways that I had was there are independent people who are far smarter than me. We always say we are a few degrees short of our PhD. They literally have PhDs that were saying from the news that they have seen, they will not take Mixon at all. He's completely off their board. At this point, I'm not drafting Mixon at all. And this is not like a Judkins thing where you can just cut Judkins at any point when he was around 12 or 13. There are still people taking Mixon in round 8 or 9 or 10. I saw that in our RotoWire Online Championship. I will not be drafting Joe Mixon this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that are just getting into the draft room and see a very familiar, very effective name like Mixon and don't quite know the context of the situation here. But yeah, I actually just used I think it was a round 11 pick. I used my 11th round pick on Nick Chubb in a slow draft here because that's the direction that I'm going here. I was a little bit, for personal reasons, like I was overexposed to Mixon a little bit early on. Before any of this injury stuff came out, I was looking at about a 4th or 5th round target for him. I thought he was going to be fine, but obviously the injury thing, it's one of those side effects of doing all these early June drafts, right, Joe? Where we're not quite in the loop now, and I'm way overexposed on Mixon, and for that reason, I'm not touching him at all at any spot, just because there's limited upside here. Nick Chubb season, he's going to keep rising up those draft boards. Over the last 10 days, we have Chubb. It's 178 in ADP. So the price, I mean, I even paid a much higher price than that. But that's the view I'm getting here. Is it's time to go ahead and use an 11th, 12th round pick on Chubb and possibly get a guy who could, if his health holds up, who could be an RB1 for a team. It's a similar situation to Jerome Ford.
Yeah, and we'll have to see. There were some reports from the Commander side of things, I think yesterday, saying they're shopping Brian Robinson. They have removed him from being from practicing or playing, in the preseason game tonight. Some have thought that maybe Brian Robinson as a landing spot could be the Texans if, in fact, Nick Chubb is not healthy. That's one to monitor, and frankly, one that I don't feel like we should be discussing at this point when we're still waiting what happens with Brian Robinson. Could be Travis Etienne as well, too. There's a few of the bigger name backs. I think Rashad White's another great example that could get traded. There's some teams that have depth at that position, and maybe it is the Texans who have at least playoff aspirations, if not a little bit more than that, that would acquire another name along Mixon and Nick Chubb. And I think that'll tell you all you need to know about both those veteran running backs. Last news of note, and this did come just momentarily ago, adds into our late first round discussion, Devon Achane dealing with a calf injury. He is not certain to practice this week. He was another guy that I've seen that pushed up at certain spots as a late first round selection in the NFFC. He was, and I believe in the most recent primetime NFFC auction, which is like their bigger level one, and one of the redraft leagues, he ended up falling 4 or 5 picks fewer or lower than his current ADP. So I think it was past Derrick Henry as a early second round pick and possibly past Drake London too. So are you at all concerned about Devon Achane? Because I know I am.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty heavily exposed to this situation, and yeah, he's not a guy that is some huge imposing physical back. You know, we got him listed here at 5'9", 188. So the injury situation is always a concern with somebody like that, and on a line that hasn't been able to protect Tua over the last couple of years. But yeah, the price right now, it's tough. I don't think even if you told me he misses week one, I'd still be fine with a early second round pick on him. I actually he seems to have a pretty clear gap between him and the RB2. But there was also some preseason shakeout here that happened here. We've assumed that Jalen Wright was going to be second on the depth chart for the longest time. He ran the ball 4 times for 3 yards on Saturday, while 6th round rookie Ollie Gordon ran 10 times for 50 yards on Saturday here. Ollie Gordon definitely way outperformed Jalen Wright, and we'll see if that continues here. But if there is a situation in which Achane cannot play week one or is deemed questionable for week one, I think Ollie Gordon could be someone that we talk about on one of our early waiver shows. I don't think it's enough to put him in 12-team redraft territory if you're doing your draft tomorrow, but, you know, just keep an eye on that. We'll put him on the watch list here and see if he finishes the preseason strong and has a chance to get work week one.
Devy leagues will definitely know the name Ollie Gordon. I think that was one of the more highly touted running back prospects in quite a while in college. I think back to Braylon Allen as well for the Badgers. That didn't work out Allen's final year. Ollie Gordon similarly kind of fell off the planet last season and became a late day 3 selection for the Dolphins. But I had mentioned Devon Achane theoretically does not get the same volume that he had last year because the Dolphins lost football games. You just can't repeat that and do the same thing and expect it to somehow have a different result. So I thought Ollie Gordon was going to be the power back element that they're missing, and therefore Devon Achane sees a bit less playing time. With Achane injured, possibly less playing time, the rise of Ollie Gordon, any one of these things, I think Achane also is out of my equation among the late first-round guys, too. So we have a bunch of preseason...
more physically imposing, too, 6'1",
yes.
225. There could be a good little contrast here between these two.
And no Alexander Madison, he's already done for the season, which would have been the other guy that could have done that function for the Dolphins offense if that was going to be a thing. So Ollie Gordon, certainly a late riser here in preseason. We have a bunch of other preseason news and notes I want to get to in just a second. But first, a word from our sponsors, Renegade Fantasy. Fantasy football players, aren't you done watching your season crumble because of all the injuries of the guys we just mentioned above? You can join the RotoWire League today on the Renegade Fantasy app, the only app that lets you substitute players in real time. You go to rotowire.com/renegadefantasy.com and hit join today. With Renegade, you're not just a GM, you're also the coach. No more losing Sundays, no more lost points. You call the shots, you make the moves, you win the league. Step out of the luxury box and onto the field. This is fantasy football without limits. This is Renegade Fantasy. Join the RotoWire League today and win. Visit rotowire.renegadefantasy.com and join the league today. All right, so Jake, what are some of the news quick hitters that you want to get to here from the preseason?
Yeah, I'm just going to throw a lot of news at you real fast here, and if you want to elaborate on any afterwards, okay. Otherwise, we can kind of move on to the meat and potatoes here, the auction draft strategy. I mentioned Ashton Genty looking pretty good in his second preseason game, scored a touchdown, bounced back from what was really a lackluster debut. A couple other people that caught my eye, Caleb Williams led a couple good drives, 6 for 10, 107 yards, and a touchdown to, I believe, Olamide Zaccheaus, if I got that right. Jackson Dart also looked very good for the Giants here, 14 of 16, 137 yards, and a touchdown. I assume it's a matter of time before he takes that job from Russell Wilson. Maybe Russell Wilson gets the week one nod, but he threw a really bad pick on a clear miscommunication. So keep an eye on a quarterback battle we maybe didn't think was going to happen. That might happen sooner than we thought here. Our guy, who I just took as my wide receiver 3, Chris Olave, saw his first game action since week 9 of 2024 and caught 2 balls. So that could be a great sign here. We both like him as a target. In Jacksonville, notably, Tank Bigsby was the first running back in the game, and ETN came afterwards. That might suggest a timeshare at best. ETN stock continues to free fall. I actually watched the first couple drives of the Niners-Raiders game, and Brock Purdy was looking Ricky Pearsall's way a lot. So that's just one of those eye test things, and Purdy was able to throw him open. Pearsall's routes were good. I just make a note on that. Maybe I'm personally bumping up Pearsall or getting him on the radar. Another interesting pecking order job battle thing, Caleb Johnson played behind Kenneth Gainwell, actually got 11 carries for Caleb Johnson. So it worries me in a sense that one, he's coming in behind Gainwell and behind Warren, and two, that 11 carries, that's maybe a little bit too much work for someone that intends to be a big part of the offense there. So maybe put a slight flag up on him in Pittsburgh here.
I'm fading a little bit. I'm fading Caleb Johnson a little bit as somebody that was higher on him than not most of the industry. The industry is higher on Caleb Johnson than I have been, but collectively within RotoWire is probably one of the more higher players on Caleb Johnson. I am a little bit more nervous about that. Not just the pass catching aspect, which he didn't look good in that first preseason game, but like you mentioned, getting the volume that you did in the second week of the preseason is not a strong indication, especially if it's like later in the game, that you have high standing within the depth chart. That can change. You can't have Kenny Gainwell doing Najee Harris role work from last year. But if that offense chooses to fade that out, which I don't know why it would, but if it does, that would be very concerning for Caleb Johnson. So I agree. He's probably one of those guys that I'm lowering a little bit in my rankings.
Yep, yeah, right on here. So we're in agreement there. And then some other quick hitters, just in case you missed it. John Mechie got dealt from the Texans to the Eagles, going to be buried on that depth chart as well. Trey Hendrickson of the Bengals, he's back on the trading block. That's kind of one of those astronaut always has been meme. I don't know when he wasn't been on the trading block, but they apparently announced it officially and are actually taking calls on it. Some minor injury news. Tet McMillan has a minor hamstring injury. We'll watch that. Jaden Blue, a rookie running back who I'm pretty high on for the Cowboys, has that heel injury, but he's optimistic he might get some run in the preseason finale. That's good. Another, maybe not quite the Joe Mixon extent, but Ramondre Stevenson practices with a non-contact jersey, still has that undisclosed injury, so he's not quite there either. Travion Henderson stock to the moon. If you watch the Chargers game, Quentin Johnson was concussed badly, left the field on a cart, so I would question his availability for the early season significantly. And some unfortunate Packer news. Marshawn Lloyd had a pretty decent preseason showing, but hurt his hamstring in that game, and it now looks like he's going to miss some time. So just some notable news and notes from around the league here after preseason week 2.
We got some pretty good questions in the chat in pertains to like late first round selections. What would you choose to do strategy wise? We'll get to that here as we go over our Best Ball Monday part of things. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we get our word in from our sponsors again here from the Best Ball side of things. Oh, well, hold on. I guess I'm going to play the
football
correct thing.
Season is right around the corner, and there's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance early than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count toward your quest for a share of $15 million. Look, I absolutely love doing these Best Ball drafts on DraftKings. Super easy, super quick. You don't have to worry about the waiver wire, all that in-season management. I'll tell you, so far, been drafting way too much of my guy, Brian Thomas Jr., getting a lot of Chris Godwin, a lot of Jordan Mason later in drafts. It's been so much fun to enter these Best Ball leagues, try out different strategies, build out a portfolio of your favorite NFL players. You can download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 Best Ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of $15 million. That's 2 chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. 1 per customer. Enter the Best Ball $15 million headliner contest by 9/4/25 to get 1 bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-best-ball. Sponsored by DK.
All right, welcome back. And again, some Best Ball conversation. Somebody in the chat mentioned in terms of like draft, or I think it was Juan here, says, if you had the 10th pick in a 10-team PPR league, what would you do with those back-to-back selections? And while we, from a Best Ball perspective, are normally in 12-team leagues, I think there's actually a little bit larger ones on the NFFC Best Ball wise. I thought it'd be good, Jake, to kind of use this idea or use this time to use our draft software from a Best Ball perspective and also apply that how the mock draft goes. So I want to make sure that you have that pulled up, Jake, while we're going over it, with the idea that we're either going to to have pick 9 or 10 in this exercise here. So
yeah, so I mean, the situation for me is when you're setting up a draft on the software here. What you want to do is you want to use if it's a best ball draft that you're using to follow along with, you want to do things like adjust your risk tolerance here. So I'll actually share the screen for a second here and get this up.
Make sure you're talking into the mic while you're
yeah, exactly. Got to talk into the mic. So I've got our best ball draft here going on here. I'm just gonna best ball, and it really comes into play with the draft plan feature here. So I'm going to
and real quick, you could see again. Jumping in here real quick, Juan, you could see there that you could set 10 teams for your league. For our example, and for the best ball stuff here, we'll keep it at 12. But if we're picking your spot, let's just say you could set a 10 and put your pick at 10 and actually look at this. Like that would be what I would encourage everyone. If you have questions as to what do you do strategy wise, literally getting the reps in with this mock draft tool at RotoWire, I think is a big deal.
And I just want to show here what the two changes I would make to your draft plan on the RotoWire tools if you're doing a best ball. One, bang, bang, bang. You want to aim for upside here. Shoot for upside because there's overall prizes in these leagues. You want to shoot for guys with high ceilings. The floor doesn't matter quite as much because honestly, it doesn't matter if you take 4th or 12th in a best ball in most cases, to be honest. Aim for upside to do that. This we're not going to worry about too much here, but I also wanted to notice this. What factors matter most to you when deciding who to draft? Consistency is out the window in best ball. So I'm going to put that all the way at the bottom here. And the reason we want to make those two adjustments to the draft plan is because having volatile game logs is just fine. That at best ball at its core, you get your best lineup that's generated every single week. So, having guys that are boom or bust is encouraged because you get their boom games and you get all their boom games and you get none of their bust games. So, like, I got just a couple guys that I'm looking at pick 140 that would be gone way earlier in the best ball. I'm looking at guys like Rashid Shaheed and looking at guys like Marvin Mims, guys like Tucker Kraft that are maybe a little too touchdown dependent here. Those guys are all, they're going to be available to me at 140 in my slow draft, but they have ADPs from 115 to 125 on DraftKings best ball here. So, you know what I should do is I should go and look at the pick. But let's just I want to look at the cheat sheet here. Who we might actually be looking at in a 10-team league, and from a best ball standpoint, maybe someone like Nabers might be a little bit more attractive than season long, especially if we talk about the fact he might miss some injury games early on. We don't know. He's dealing with 3 injuries. Apparently they're optimistic, but he'll have some huge games. Guys like Jacobs and Amon-Ra are consistent. They're perfectly fine targets here, but even someone like Achane might get bumped up a little bit because he has, what did he have? Like a 45-point fantasy game last year when he broke out. He's very capable of doing that, but he's also capable of going away for extended periods of time. So if you're looking at a best ball, players like that with those big boom games, I'm sure there are going to be games where Genty gets bottled up and he's going to have some breakout games too. So the big high single game ceiling potential is what you're looking at in best ball.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great part of using this, again, just getting reps from a mock draft perspective. A bunch of people have said in the chat, like, you could go, one had said he goes running back often. And I was like, you could, no issue with that in a 10-team league, but what if you practice that out? Like, let's actually look at maybe Marvin Hampton or James Cook or Kenneth Walker or Kyron Williams. You can get that in the 3-4 turn in that scenario. It's like, well, you can get some higher end receivers if those are the running backs that are available using that RotoWire mock draft tool again. And it is for free for us to go ahead and do that just by if you have a login either on the app or the software itself. So I would encourage you guys to use that mock draft stuff. I've liked the AC factor, the alcohol consumed variance part of things in the mock draft because it's better practice in the worst case scenarios, which I really appreciate. Because I've had a friends and family league just yesterday where I had like 4 worst case scenarios go back to back to back. I was anticipating my league mates doing something completely different, and I had to then pivot from it. So using the RotoWire mock draft tool, I think, is really, really helpful with that too. So I think we're good with the best ball part of things. But is there any more that you want to talk about with the auction?
Sure. I just wanted to run a mock draft here out of the 10th spot for a 10-team league. Like I said, hey, if it's best ball, grab Genty and Nabers. Go for your high risk. If it's season long, I might be more likely to grab Jacobs and Brian Thomas. That's kind
Yeah.
of what I'd be looking at there. So just wanted to throw that out there, do a quick mock draft, see what happens. Or do you want to try to do the running back, and see what happens there? We're kind of doing our mock draft Monday to a degree here. And of course, it's going to recommend receivers here. But hey, maybe it's time for Mario and Hampton. Actually, in real life, I think you make the Breece Hall decision there. And then, so now you're looking at, you started Genty, Jacobs, Hall. Now you're probably grabbing. I don't know if you want to double tap Jets.
I would take Terry McLaurin here just because I'm still not concerned about the contract stuff, but there's a number of receivers in that range you probably can go, and you might even be taking Terry McLaurin a little bit higher than what he typically tends to go to as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, let's just keep plugging along here. I think I'm going to take Hawkinson here. Actually,
I like it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to see
Jake and I, for the listeners who have been missing our mock draft Mondays, are a desperate search of an A+ grade. You get the grades directly afterwards when you complete your mock drafts. And while we have put together a lot of reps, and especially a lot of reps live on air here, we have yet to get the infamous A or A+. And it's actually pretty rare.
I'm going to draft the kicker super early, see if I can get that to get me the.
we have seen it in the like at this point in the RotoWire office chat. There's a competition to see who can accumulate how many A+ drafts, which it ends being a volume thing. Again, on top of repetition, people are just going crazy trying to get the A+ stuff. So it is a rare grade. We have yet to achieve it. So we've been trying to do that on one of these Mondays here. And I think Jake being dialed into it, I appreciate that because I do want to be associated with an A+ at some point doing one of these mock drafts.
Again, 90% out of 100. Just missed it here. Purdy, Genty, Jacobs, McLaurin, Sutton. Oh, I only did 2 receivers in this one. Even with the early kicker pick, I couldn't quite get there, but Pollard, Ridley, Downs, Shaheed, Pitts. I don't know. I like the way this team breaks out. A lot of week 12 buys, but other than that, we're good. So that'll run it for mock draft Monday here. We can kind of get back to our regularly scheduled programming here. I don't know why that was tough to get up.
Well, we got a lot still on the table talking about auction strategy, nomination parts, things. Jack wants to know some of our undervalued players. We won't give you all the tea on that, but we'll go over the strategy part of things throughout the last bit of the show. I want to get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. If you're watching along live for us, we'll be back momentarily. If you're on the audio portions of things, we'll be right back here in just a bit. Okay, and again, we're talking auction draft strategy, salary cap if you're in certain places like Yahoo or ESPN using that format, auction or salary. We have the infamous RotoWire Stake League coming up here in just a couple days. Jake and I did the NFFC auction draft, which we did a live stream for. I thought it was actually really good. It was about 2 hours. You don't have to actually watch the whole thing if you want, but there are literal strategy things that have played out over the course. That one we saw some things we'll talk about today. And I also had this on the Angel Fire radio show on Sunday morning from 10 to noon Eastern on Channel 87, talked about a little bit from the quarterback perspective. So I don't know what you want to dive into first, Jake, with this. Again, if we're just kind of doing like a beginner's guide to auction drafts, I think there are certain things strategy-wise everyone needs to know.
Yeah, I just want to do like big picture that you want to enter an auction with some kind of a general strategy. You want to roughly allocate your budget to certain positions. You want to set some players that you want to target, maybe acknowledge players you want to avoid. But the thing with auctions is it's very difficult to generate a perfect auction value formula that comes along with accurate dollar values because there's a degree of variance from league to league. There are leagues where everyone is very conservative and wants a balanced team, and there are leagues where and owners, it goes down to the individual level where you're going to spend all your money on your first 3 picks, get like 3 of the first 5 overall picks, and then hang up for a while. Some leagues really inflate the very, very top level of talent, which makes a lot of room for dollar days guys at the very end. Some leagues don't do that so much. So yes, you want to plan. You want to use, obviously RotoWire has auction values, custom auction values where you can get your settings in and get basically custom values based on that. And we're going to recommend guys like Saquon and Bijan for around $60. Jamar Chase right up there as well in a $200 budget. But you just have to be ready to adjust on the fly to some degree in these auctions because every auction runs very differently. I know our RotoWire Stake League, for example, it's a 14-teamer, but those top players, man, if you want Saquon, if you want Chase, if you want CeeDee Lamb even, or Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs, you're going to have to pay a top premium. And then usually there are a lot of values towards the end of the draft here, but not every draft is like that. Some are Some are a lot more balanced. So again, like any draft in general, or I always say it's the popular phrase in MMA: everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Everyone has a strategy, and then something like that happens. Just be ready to adjust on the fly. You definitely want a vague guide, but you don't want to be looking at your player list and be like, "Ooh, Saquon Barkley, I had him at $59. He's at 62. Maybe that's a little too rich. Go get him. Go bid $4 because in the grand scheme of it, to get one of the top overall first round players, it's perfectly fine to go ahead and do that, especially if you see other players that are going higher than your dollar values. You just kind of have to mentally adjust, like, okay, this tier of players is going for about 5 to 10% over my projected value, and then you live with that from there. I mean, if you go in with a piece of paper and are not going to go $1 more for anyone than what your piece of paper says, you're probably going to have a bad time here. You got to read the room and adapt and learn. So that's the biggest thing I can say from the beginning about auction strategy. But there are a lot of other finer points that we can touch on quickly as well.
I think you're exactly right. I keep preaching flexibility. We talked about that in the live stream for the NFFC draft. We talked about that on Angel Fire show as well too on Sunday. Like flexibility within what your strategy is, and also being willing to adopt from the price tag points of it. I have asked you this question before. I have asked people who are really into auction drafts this question as well, and there isn't necessarily a defined time, but I always think there's at least 2 lulls in any salary cap or auction draft, and whether it be around like the 45-minute mark or so when a lot of the top end money is gone, or really like the hour and a half mark as well too. It's almost like 45-minute increments. It seems to be like the point. But if you catch that lull correctly, you are going to walk away with one of the better values at your position. Yep. Because people might not be paying attention. They might have told themselves they can't spend any more. They might just be checked out. I mean, this is typically from an auction draft or salary cap perspective a little bit longer. Do you feel like there's a certain time where you're like, all right, if I have chose to wait, I'm going to be aggressive here whenever I see this marker? Yeah. Is there any indication in your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, you want to use whatever tool you're using, or even you're just within your draft room. You can see how much money that the other owners have. And if there are 2 or 3 owners that are left to bid and one of them spends, maybe turns around, doesn't think about the next player because they just bought someone. I think right in that 45-minute line, something like that could happen. And you can get some value where everyone decides they're going to wait on quarterbacks, and all of a sudden you end up with Jalen Hurts out there for $12, like what happened to us in our NFFC auction last week. So it's the beauty of auctions. Also, one of the more challenging parts is you have to pay attention at all times so you don't miss any kind of value. Right around that 45-minute mark, maybe even in the 30-minute mark, though, Joe, you also have to watch out for bidding wars that happen for the last of a player's tier.
Yep.
Tier-based drafting has its pluses and minuses. A lot of us at RotoWire aren't huge fans of sticking to that, but you have to keep in mind, like, okay, Saquon, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry, Ashton Genty, Christian McCaffrey. That's tier 1 of running backs here. What the problem that you're going to have here is right at the end, if those first 5 are off and the last one's up, there are going to be 6 other fantasy managers that are thinking to themselves, man, I need to get this one RB1 for my team. And they end up falling into a bidding war for that. And that's how you get situations where maybe McCaffrey ends up going for just as much or more than Jahmyr Gibbs, because people are waiting for that bidding war. So part of the way you avoid that is by recognizing value early. We always like to talk about pay attention during those first couple nominations, because a lot of the managers are sometimes hesitant, and usually 1, 2, or 3, you can get a pretty good value in one of those picks here and not overpay. You can end up, maybe because everyone's hesitant to pull the trigger and there's no data on where price is at, maybe you end up with Saquon or Bijan for 55, and then all of a sudden the other one goes for 62 because they're nominated later. And again, most of these contexts I'm talking about are with a $200 budget. That's really the most common here. So jumping early for a player that you like and avoiding those bidding wars for the last of a tier is definitely something that you have to watch out for. It's the same thing with receivers. You could end up paying as much for Nico Collins as the person who paid for Amon-Ra, because he might be the last player in a perceived tier that everybody is looking at and following along with. So those are just some examples for this year that I've seen happen and that could happen, and something that you need to be mindful of when looking at your cheat sheets and who is off the board.
So let's play this exercise out. I watched this happen at the Kings Classic auction draft with our guy Jim Coventry in terms of the quarterbacks. I watched it happen specifically almost counter to what we did in the NFFC auction draft that happened last weekend on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel. You can go ahead and watch us do that one live. I believe there is a tier of 5 quarterbacks. And if you're in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, maybe it's just 4. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. Typically, if you're in a 12-team league, you could make this 12, 14, doesn't really matter. Let's just say a 12-team league. When you see 3 of those quarterbacks go off the board, you would normally say, in your example, Jake, that last of the tier would then be priced up. So let's just say it actually goes in order, and Jalen Hurts would be number 4 of this group. But what I have seen happen now on multiple occasions, and I think is actually going to apply to the quarterback position this year, is you will get a discount on one of the last of that tier of quarterback because there's a certain group of people that have entered this auction draft saying, I won't spend anything at quarterback no matter what the price tag is, even if it is a bargain relative to Jalen Hurts or Jaden Daniels. So let's explain this process to somebody that's kind of new, because this would go counter to your idea, Jake, that, okay, at the end of the tier, somebody's get priced up. There are certain positions, quarterback and tight end in particular, that actually makes sense to be aggressive, even if it is at the end of a tier, in your opinion.
Yeah, we have to discuss quarterback strategy in particular, because I think the general consensus and what you and I enter most auctions planning to do, and what a lot of people think they're going to do, is to wait on quarterback. I mean, why spend $20 for someone like Lamar? Maybe he is the best quarterback, but you could spend 20 on someone like Lamar. But there's also a very good chance you could end up with Caleb Williams, Dak Prescott, CJ Stroud, Justin Fields in the $1 to $3 range. You might even see a Goff or Purdy fall into the $1 to $3 range there, right there. So why would you spend that money on a quarterback when you could actually have a whole nother player, a legitimate RB2 to focus, to build your lineup around, or at least give you a much more depth lineup? So in general, I would say, yes, you have to consider what you're going to allocate on quarterback. And most people kind of advocate that strategy. But exactly like you said, Joe, sometimes you have to zig when the other managers are zagging. There might be 3 of your 12 managers that are actually deciding that they want to spend up on quarterbacks in this league. So Lamar goes, Josh Allen goes, maybe Jaden Daniel goes for a little bit over projections. And then all of a sudden Hurts is out there, and the other 9 managers are not bidding because the people that decided they were going to spend on quarterbacks already have, and nobody else has it in their budget plan. In that case, you might actually have to adjust your strategy, again, being flexible, jump on the fly. And if you can get someone like Hurts for $11 or $12, that's a fantastic value, and I think you have to run with that. It's a little bit similar to with tight ends. A lot of people punt tight ends. Bowers and McBride are in their own tier. Kittle might be tier 2, and then you have Laporta and Hawkinson tier 3, Andrews, Kelsey, Njoku tier 4, and then after that it's kind of a crapshoot. You might decide that you only want to spend $1 on tight ends. There are plenty of guys. You could go for your guy Mason Taylor, Joe, for $1. At the end, I know people were looking for examples of good $1 players in the projections or in the auction values that I have listed for RotoWire. I mean, you're looking at Dalton Kincaid, Jake Ferguson, Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith around a $1 player, which is, hey, that's perfectly fine as your tight end. And then you end up with a much better wide receiver 3, a much better RB2, or just an overall depth team there. But so that's the situation. Generally, I think I like to avoid spending money on quarterbacks and tight ends. But again, being flexible and catching the value if it comes to you are 2 things that you have to watch out for.
And one of the things, we only have a few more minutes yet, and we'll talk about some overall auction strategy here. But the idea of price and form literally comes into play with this quarterback idea. So if we are in a 12-team league, there are 3 people that get the Josh Allen, the Lamar Jackson, the Jaden Daniels. That means there are 3 less people that probably don't feel comfortable price enforcing at the quarterback. You could say on paper, well, yeah, if Lamar Jackson goes for $20 and Josh Allen goes for 21, and you have Jaden Daniels for 18, you should have Jalen Hurts probably around $17 or $18. But the people willing to actually price enforce up to that point and not get potentially stuck with a quarterback are less, because there are 3 less people there. There are people that are entering that don't have a whole lot of interest in paying for an upper end quarterback. And that's how you get that tier, whatever it ends up being, the last one of Jaden Daniels or Jalen Hurts, whatever it is. That's how he ends up getting a little bit cheaper. So I guess I'll pose this to you.
Mhm.
How do you choose to do the price enforcing? Like, what is the idea? Like, when you're live, you're hitting the clicker. What is your point where
Yeah.
you're like, yes, I'm going to be aggressive doing this? And is it really just about maintaining and understanding the rest of what the league is doing? Because I think that's the easiest way to price enforce, but it's not the only way to price enforce.
Exactly. So yeah, even to go a step backwards real quick, just price enforcing. Maybe you don't want a particular player that's currently up on the nomination block here, but they're about to go off the board. The clock is ticking down, and they're about to go off the board for way cheaper than what you have. Maybe some other owners fell asleep. Maybe somebody that wanted to bid is having tech freezing issues, but for whatever
Yeah.
reason, a
Yeah.
player is going to go way under their projected value. That's part of the reason you have your sheet with you, just so you have a ballpark range. Say for example, just randomly, say Chase Brown's about to go off the board for $26. Obviously, you want to bid that up because we put him at about 33 in this type of league, which I think is even a little bit undervalued. Anyway, I need more Chase Brown this year. But what I'm saying is you want to price enforce to make sure somebody else doesn't get a steal. And that can happen to some degree at the quarterback range. Maybe the quarterback pricing hasn't been set yet. And even if you didn't want to spend double digit on quarterbacks, if someone's about to get Jalen Hurts for $12, you kind of price enforce to make sure the person that wants him has to pay 14 or 15 instead of $12, just to help. The idea is to bleed money from other owners, stop them from getting values that are too good. However, it is risky. It is risky in two ways. Like, if you already have your quarterback, you probably don't want to get caught price enforcing on another quarterback, no matter how good the value is. It does you no good to have $30 spent on quarterbacks, but even if it's between Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow, because guess what? You can only start one of them this week. Obviously, this goes out the window in a 2-quarterback format here. So it does you no good to price enforce for when you could get stuck with your second quarterback or second tight end. I generally say you have to be okay with getting the player if you end up stuck with the player in this situation. So, like, even for example, up until maybe recently, I'm coming around. If I wasn't a huge Ashton Genty guy early on, I thought his price was too high. But if we're sitting in an auction and he's sitting at the table at $32, I'm going to hit the bid button anyway.
Yeah.
Just because I would be okay getting someone I don't like because of the tremendous value. And also, chances are someone that was hoping to get him is going to outbid you in that situation anyway. So yes, price enforcing is necessary. It'll come back to help you out later on in dollar days when maybe you have a couple dollars more than your opponent who you price enforced because you made them pay $4 more on a player than either they wanted to pay or you prevented them from getting that crazy good value here. So yeah, that's kind of the concept of price enforcing and when to do it. I also want to discuss nomination strategy to some degree. I know we only have a couple
Let's do
minutes
it.
here,
Yeah, let's do
but
it.
I wanted to throw out a couple points on that. I mentioned that early in the draft, very, very early in the draft, sometimes you can find values because people are a little uneasy, uncomfortable, because there isn't enough data yet to see what these ranges are. So very early in the draft, I could very much see if you have one of the top 3 or 4 nominations to nominate somebody that you like. And maybe get them for a little bit of a value. But as the draft goes on, I generally, at least in my personal taste, I like to nominate players who I'm below the general field on. I might nominate someone like Nabers, I guess, who, again, there's a price I'll pay for any of these players, but I think that the field is generally a little bit higher on them than I am. And maybe I know we differ on this a little bit, but Drake London, maybe to some degree, might fit that for me personally. I know you're not a big Achane guy, so maybe you want to nominate him, because the idea is you get the top players that you don't want on your team. One of the managers is going to end up spending $40 or more on them, and you're draining their budget and giving you more purchasing power here. So nomination strategy, that's one thing. Also, if I decide I'm going to buy Brock Bowers, the next 2 people I'm nominating are Trey McBride and George Kittle.
Exactly.
I know I'm not going to buy those players, but I need somebody else to spend money on those players, so I have a better chance in a bidding war for that RB2 or wide receiver 2 that I'm looking to get here. So that's kind of where nomination strategy is. Then, of course, there's a totally different nomination strategy at the end of the auction. You have to look at everybody's budget. If it's down to dollar days, you start to nominate players you want, obviously, because they'll end up on your team. I always advocate in keeping a $2 max bid in case somebody else, don't spend your entire max bid is what I'm saying. In case somebody else is about to get a steal in dollar days, you can up them to $2 and steal a player. Even better if you can keep a $3 max bid, again, just in case. But if it's one of your last bids, you can also throw a player out there at $2 as well, if everyone else is down to dollar days as well. So the nomination strategy changes a lot from the beginning to the end of the auction, but there are a lot of factors that come into play.
This is my favorite league to play in. I understand it's unconventional to the relative rest of the fantasy football universe. I think I saw a split like 95 to 5% of people play redraft or snake league as opposed to auction draft. This is my preferred format, because I have some discipline. I've been in these before. I don't mind being flexible to certain strategies, but also it's my preferred format because I can theoretically get a team of all Joe guys. Now, in a league of 14 people who all know what I'm writing about, talking about, promoting in terms of players, that doesn't always happen in like the RotoWire Stake League, but the idea of being able to get your people is something that I think is a lot of fun in the auction drafts. And the strategy of nomination when you're trying to price enforce, this is my holy grail. I love strategy. This has been the whole thing I've been building my brand around, it feels like, over the past year. And I think auction drafts are a culmination of that. So I'm going to be breaking this down. The RotoWire Stake League, we actually have an article up on the RotoWire site. It will probably be behind a paywall. I'm not entirely positive how that'll shape out, but I think that draft, is that Wednesday, right? Our Stake League's Wednesday?
Yes, I believe that is this Wednesday.
So Jake will be on one side of it. I'll be writing on more of the other side of it, which you'll see Peter Schenke, Jeff Erickson, a few of the other big names. So we'll have that article up on the site probably by the end of the week as well too. And if you are interested in more of that stuff, either JB Fantasy Sports or at RotoJake, we'll be happy to go over all that strategy talk with you for auction and salary cap formats. But I think that about does it for us, Jake, on this edition of the RotoWire Monday Fantasy Football Podcast, of course, brought to you by DraftKings Bestball. We are only a couple weeks away from this then turning into the Waiver Wire podcast show, which I think at this point is maybe 2 or 3 weeks. We have our big over-under bet totals as well for the wins for each team, which Jake absolutely annihilated last year. Hopefully he does equally good for everyone and us as well this year. But we have that and probably one more show before we are kicking off your pre-week 1 waiver wire. So we are getting ever closer to the NFL season. I can't wait, Jake.
Yep, I can't wait either. It's going to be a great auction this week, and can't wait to see how the leagues comp like they usually do. And yeah, sell your league on an auction. I'll leave with that. Sell your league on an auction. If you got the 9th pick in the snake draft, you ain't getting Jamar Chase. Sorry, guys, but you have a shot at any player in the auction. You could have both Jamar Chase and Saquon on your team in an auction if you really want to. It's a little bit longer. It's intimidating for some people, but I promise your league will never go back once you try an auction.
All right, that does it for us again. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll be back again next month.